So we've talked a bit about scientific notation and how useful it is for representing big or small numbers, but let's actually connect scientific notation back to the units. And so one way that we have to sort of, you can think about it, abbreviating scientific notation or abbreviating these powers of 10 is using what we call metric prefixes. And so let's just give an example here for the first one. So 10 to the 12th would actually, you could actually represent it as tera, which would be represented by a capital T. So to give you some idea what we mean by a prefix, let's take something that we've already introduced. So let's talk about a kilogram. So a kilogram. So a kilogram is actually, if we break down this word, kilo, is actually 10 to the third. So this up here is actually kilo, and it's actually represented by a K. So this actually means 10 to the third grams. That's what we mean by a kilogram. And 10 to the third is just 1,000. So a kilogram is 1,000 grams. So that's what we mean by a metric prefix. We just mean that instead of writing 10 to the third or 10 to the power of that unit, we can instead just write the metric prefix right, like attached as part of that word right in front of the unit. So let's give another example. So 10 to the ninth is giga. Its prefix is giga, and we represent it as a capital G. So let's say I had, I had 10 to the, let's say 3 times 10 to the ninth seconds, right? So I could actually say that that's 3 gigaseconds. And if I don't want to write the whole word out, I could write it as 3 capital G S. The G is just from giga, and then the S is just for seconds. So these are all the same thing. And so for our kilogram example, we could actually represent that. This is why this actually becomes kilogram of just kg. The K is just representing the kilo. So let's continue running through our list here. So there are, of course, more powers of 10 in between these, like deci, deca, and so on. But these are the powers of 10 that we're going to be using the most, and especially kilo and 10 to the 6th, 10 to the negative third, and 10 to the negative 6th. So let's keep on going through them. So 10 to the 6th is known as mega. So mega, and it's given by a capital M. And let's go down to 10 to the negative third. So 10 to the negative third is milli, and given by a lowercase m. So you're probably most used to seeing milli in the case of a millimeter, right? So again, if you just look at this word, milli, right? So it's actually 10 to the negative third meters. Or if we were to write it out, it would be m for the milli, and then meters, right? So that's actually what we mean by, in this some quantity, 1 millimeter. This is what we mean by that, right? So let's do 10 to the negative 6th. So this is micro, and we give it by this kind of symbol. It sort of looks like a U. We call it mu. Then we have 10 to the negative 9th, which is nano. So you might have heard people refer to like nanoseconds and so on. 10 to the negative 12th is pico. We represent that with a P. And so these are just metric prefixes. So something you can remember is that once you reach kilo, above that, all of the metric prefixes, so any power of 10 that's greater than 3 is going to be a capital letter. That's how we represent it. And anything less than a kilo, any power of 10 less than 10 to the third, including the negative ones, of course, is going to be lowercase. And so that's just metric prefixes. They make it way simpler to represent different quantities. All you do is just stick the prefix in front of the quantity that you're talking about. So if I wanted to just like briefly go over another example, let's say, what's another quantity we could talk about? Let's say if we were talking about, I guess we could stick with time. So we could stick with seconds. So if you had, 10 to the 12 seconds, that's equal to 1 terasecond, as I've done on the bottom here, but just to sort of reiterate it, so 1 ts. So that's just how metric prefixes work. You just take the prefix part of it and stick it in front of the base unit that you're talking about, or excuse me, of the of the smaller unit that you're talking about, such as in the case of the kilogram, it's 10 to the third grams. Or if you just want to actually represent that as the unit that we would use itself as part of the unit, you would just use the letter in front of the letter we use to represent that smaller unit. So in the case of the kilogram, it's K for kilo and then the gram. So it's kg. So that's what whenever we write kg, that's just kilograms and so on. That's how you would do it for any of the metric prefixes.